Hey there, hi there, hello there. I'm Les Bowen, and I'm here once again with you for Bowen on the Birds, a podcast on the A2D Radio Network. I'm as surprised as you that this has lasted as long as it has. Surely the people in charge have seen one of these by now, but they keep sending me the links, so I'm going to keep showing up and talking until someone forces me not to. We ought to have a good show today. We have my old running mate from the Philadelphia Daily News and later the Inquirer, Paul Domowitch, will be joining us. Paul is the Hall of Fame selector for Philadelphia, a great weight and privilege that he holds. And we want to talk about the Hall of Fame and a piece that he contributed to recently on the 33rd Team website, where he and some other Hall of Fame selectors talked about the Hall of Fame chances of current players, including several Eagles. So always a meaty subject, and especially when there's still 3 weeks before training camp and nothing else is really going on. So without further ado, Paul Domowitch is here somewhere. Let's use the magic of the interwebs. There he is. Yes, Domo. I'd recognize you anyway.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. What's up with you?
Not much, just enjoying this smothering heat. Counting the days until September.
Yeah, as Paul knows, I have this big, tough rescue pit bull, and she's a fearsome dog in many respects, except when it comes to walking in the heat. And we had a long walk today, and I kind of went a little farther than I probably should have. And the dog ended up like just flopping all over the place, like she'd been coached by Coach K or something. It was she was drinking water. I take water with me, and then there's a lady on the next street who puts out water for dogs. We drank all of that. We were like, it was I don't know if I was going to get her home or not. She's 55 pounds. I don't want to carry her, but she made it, and she's happily chomping away on a bone somewhere in the background. You can probably hear her. But anyway, Dama, I mentioned before I brought you on that you are our Philadelphia Hall of Fame selector, and I mentioned the story that you contributed to on the 33rd Team about, it was probably about 30 current players overall that, should have a pretty good chance at making the Hall of Fame eventually, and several Eagles in that group. So I thought we'd start out talking, before we start talking about the Eagles guys and their chances and so forth. I think many fans don't know much about the Hall of Fame and how it works and that sort of thing. How did you become the selector for Philadelphia? I know Ray Didinger had the gig before you. I envision perhaps a woman's arm coming out of a pond with a sword or something, or maybe there's a fight, among a bunch of battle royale, and you're swinging a mace or something like that. I don't know. How does this happen? How do you get to do that job?
Well, I mean, our good friend Ray Didinger did it for many years when he was working for the Daily News, and before that, the Bulletin. Late 90s or mid 90s, he left us to go to NFL Films, which made him ineligible to be a voter for the Hall of Fame anymore because he worked for the league.
Right.
So our old boss, Mike Rathett, actually did it for a couple of years.
Did not know
and
that.
And then Mike turned it over to he recommended me at some point when he decided to stop doing it. I've been doing it since 2002. And they haven't told me to go away yet, so I'm still doing it.
So what was that like the first time that you did it? I mean, it had to be pretty intimidating, I guess. I know there's all kinds of work that goes into the establishing the finalists, and then the way they used to do it, and I know technology has changed some of this, and the changing fortunes of the news business. It used to be because everybody covered the Super Bowl, everybody just got into a room on Saturday. When I was happily at play somewhere, having a great day, you were locked in a room with a bunch of guys arguing about who needed to be in the Hall of Fame. What is the process now?
Not too much difference, other than it starts in, I think, they've given us a list of people that are eligible, and I think we have to turn in a list of 25 by, I want to say, late September, early October. They announced the 5 semifinalists sometime in December.
Okay.
We vote again remotely for 15 finalists, and then they tabulate that and come up with 15 finalists. And for years, and again, it'll happen this year, we meet the Saturday before the Super Bowl and discuss the 15 finalists, the modern era candidates, in addition to senior candidates and coaches or contributors. Last couple of years since COVID, we've done that meeting on Zoom, but this year they'll be going back to the
live. Yeah.
Yeah. I apologize. The one difference they're going to make is it won't be the Saturday before the Super Bowl. We're going to meet at a neutral location sometime in mid-January because they like knowing a few weeks ahead of time so they can do the new thing where they travel to
make a big deal out of it. Yeah.
And knock on their door rather than have them. Yeah. It used to be pretty cruel the way they did it. They would have all of the finalists come to the Super Bowl site, and then they waited for a knock on the door from the executive director. Well, if you weren't one of the 5 or 7 guys that were being knocked on to be told you're made the Hall of Fame, I mean, it was evil. It was
oh,
really
good Lord!
bad.
I had no idea. I didn't remember that. Wow, that is really that's tough. That's that
kind of explains.
Yeah,
that explains why Brian Dawkins still won't talk to me after not making it the first year when he was there and nobody knocked on his door. So, but anyway, yeah, this way is much more humane. By the they'll find out in plenty of time before the Super Bowl when they make the announcement. They make the announcement now. I believe it's the Thursday before the Super Bowl at that NFL Honors show.
Okay. So
that's essentially it. And they have we have separate committees less for to decide on a seniors and now a coach and contributor category, and then they nominate I think I think last year it was 2 coach contributors and 2 senior candidates. They nominated them, and we voted on them in addition to the 15 modern era candidates.
Okay. So it seems like more people go in than used to go in 20 years ago, on an average year now. Is that the
modern era? Modern era, no, because it's still 5.
Yeah.
But they've increased
yeah.
There's a clear backlog less of seniors and veterans because you're only a modern era candidate for 20 years, and then you go into this purgatory where the only way you can get in from there is to be nominated by the senior committee, and for a long time they would only allow 1 in a year, which didn't help much as far as eliminating the log jam. No. In 2020, when they had the 100th anniversary of the NFL, they, I think, put in 20 seniors, which kind of helped a lot. Since then, they've expanded it to 2 or 3 a year, and they've made coaches, given them their own category with contributors rather than have them fight for a Hall of Fame spot with a player. So, I mean, the whole point is to try to get as many deserving people in as possible.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm amazed, a few weeks ago, Bob Brown died, the great offensive lineman. And I had no idea that he didn't get into the Hall of Fame until 2000. I mean, to me, that is, when I was a kid in the 60s, I knew the names of maybe 3 or 4 NFL offensive linemen. One was Jerry Kramer because he wrote that book, Instant Replay, and there were maybe Jim Ringo because he had the same name as a Beatle, and Bob Brown. I knew Bob Brown because Bob Brown, everybody, as far as I knew, thought Bob Brown was the dominant offensive tackle of that time. how the hell is he not in the Hall of Fame for like 20 some years after he retires?
I'll tell you, I mean, clearly the system isn't perfect. Unlike baseball, there are 50 selectors now. I think at one point there were about 45, as opposed to baseball, which basically, if you're a member of the Baseball Writers Association, you get a vote. That's got its own set of problems with the arrogance and everything that goes on there. But football has a lot of prejudices that I've noticed since I've been a member. Before I became a selector, they really favored winning teams, guys on winning teams, which is one reason I think why Rob Brown suffered, why Claude Humphrey, it took so long for him to get in. If you played for the Packers, Dolphins, or Steelers or Cowboys in the 70s or 80s, you were set. I mean, they were, you were going in by the bundle. If you played for the Atlanta Falcons or some bad Eagle teams in the 70s, it was tough. Harold
Carmichael,
exactly. I mean, Harold's a perfect example. I mean, he never should have had to wait until an expanded Veterans Committee put him in. I mean, he deserved to go in long ago, but he suffered because he spent most of his career playing for a bad Eagles team until Dick Vermeil came to town.
Yes. And because the game changed so much in terms of standards of what reception, totals meant and so forth. That's something I want to ask you about too, is that, so for me, obviously I'm not a Hall of Fame voter, never will be, but if I'm thinking, okay, what's a Hall of Fame player? To me, it's a player who is among the top handful at his position, and handful to me would be 3, 4, maybe 5 at some positions. Top handful for several years, not just once or twice. Pro Bowl probably wouldn't mean that much to me because it's been so devalued over the last decade or so with all the changes in the game, which have resulted in guys making it who weren't selected, weren't even first alternates a lot of times, Pro Bowl wouldn't mean much to me. All Pro would mean a lot to me. That's selected. I don't know if many of our listeners, viewers know, but that's selected by the Associated Press, which isn't perfect, but they only pick 2 people at each position for the whole league. So even if they're wrong here and there, if you've made several all pro teams, chances are you're a dominant player, right? I mean I don't know, but statistically though, standards have changed so much. What was a great receiver 40 years ago isn't even a drop in the bucket today. How do you assess stuff like that? And I guess we're going to get to that after we do our little commercial break here. I talked so long that I ran right up against it. So hold that thought, Donald, and we'll be right back.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
All righty, we're back, Dom. We were talking about Hall of Fame standards, statistical standards, and how the heck you determine whether somebody's a Hall of Famer. Over to you.
Yeah, I think we do a pretty good job. The selectors do a pretty good job of acknowledging the differences in how the game changes, particularly offensively, over the years. I mean, I don't think Harold was punished so much for the fact that he's not, doesn't have he didn't have the receiving numbers as guys today, because obviously the game has changed and it's a passing league now. Like I said, I think he was punished more so because he played on a losing team. A lot of times it's just a matter of a log jam. You look at even last year, the finalists we had. part of the problem is, and I explain this to people who get upset when somebody they just feel should have been in doesn't make it that year. You take Dawkins, for example. He got in his second year, not his first. But typically, when I've looked at the 15 finalists every year, in my mind, going in like 10 or 11 are really Hall of Fame worthy. But you can't vote for 10 or 11. You can vote for 5. We reduce it to that number, and so that's what we're up against to begin with. Last year you had take receivers for example. You had Reggie Wayne, you had Andre Johnson, you had Torrey Holt, all finalists. And I think what ends up and at some point, at least 2 and probably all 3 are going to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know when. They all have deserving numbers. They're all pretty much close to top 10 in receiving yards. But I think what has happened when you have players at the same position in the same year, they end up splitting the vote. We discuss all these guys. We acknowledge that this is going to happen, but you can't make people say, okay, we're not going to vote for this guy this year. So, it's happened. I'm trying to think when in Brian's first year, when Doc was first eligible, he was going up against John Lynch. Now, in my mind, that was not a contest. John Lynch could not do a tenth of the things Brian Doc could do at that position. He was a cover 2 safety. Brian Dawkins was basically the guy Jim Johnson built his defense around. But that first year, I don't think enough people recognize that, as even though I tried to convince them of that. The second year, they were, it was easier to do. Bill Belichick weighed in with a comment that was relayed to everyone, and everybody realized that he deserved. And John Lynch eventually got in too. He just did not deserve to get in before Brian. So you got things like that happen. There's some things that are just, positions. Some certain positions are harder to convince. It seems like they get lost. I remember Alan Faneca. I thought he was a
great
first-year guy that would have gotten in. He had to wait 4 years he was a finalist for 4 years before he finally went in. You see a lot of that. Zach Thomas is getting in this year, the linebacker from the Dolphins. I think it was his 4th year as a finalist. Sam Mills got in last year after 3 years as a finalist. Sometimes how many years of eligibility they have left kind of factors in. I think people are influenced by the fact that, like with Sam Mills last year, it was his last year of eligibility as a modern era candidate. If he didn't get in, he would have gone into the senior backlog. And the year before, he didn't. When we had the reduction vote from 15 to 10, he didn't make it. He stayed at 50. He was one of the first 5 guys eliminated. But I think there was myself and others harped on the fact that this was it for him, and it apparently convinced enough people to vote for him. So, you have influences like that where people say, well, this guy can wait a couple of years, this guy can't. It's not a perfect system, but it's we spend time generally, as I never made Saturday dinners with you because we'd be spending 8 hours in a room trying to.
I can't imagine.
It's.
So when you started doing this in 2002, you were probably one of the younger voters at that time, or at least most of those guys were your age or older. I would imagine there have been quite a few changes in the pool of people since then. Do you find younger voters are different? Do they have different interests, different ways of looking at it than the guys did when you first started out?
Well, everybody's younger than us, nonetheless. So
yeah.
But no, there are clearly they've brought in when people retire. they bring in, they look for younger voters. I think they've, I mean, when I first started in 2002, there might've been maybe one woman in the room. I'm trying to think. Now there's at least 3 or 4 or 5. They've increased the number of ex-players. We've got, I want to say 4 in the room now, or at least ex-players, coaches, and executives. I mean, people like Bill Polian and Dan Coryell. I mean, Dan Fouts and Tony Dungy. Yeah. So that helps getting their perspective. So, but yeah, it's a younger room than it was when I was first did it in 2002, and that but I think, and I think there's enough of a mix that they respect when older people tell them about people they never actually saw play except on NFL films highlights. So, but yet most of them have an understand. It's most of them, if they're in that room, have there was enough of a check on what they knew and the respect they had for the game that they're not just in there and don't know anything. I mean, I haven't found that. I've disagreed with a lot of people over the years, but I haven't I've never thought this guy has no clue. He doesn't belong in this room.
Right. Okay. So let's get to the Eagles, the current Eagles, who, this is obviously an Eagles era that's going to produce some Hall of Famers, and not every Eagles era does. It's not like the whole hall is filled with Eagles, even though the franchise has been around since 1933. But there's some guys on this team right now that have an excellent shot, and you delineated those in that piece on the 33rd team. The guy that I'm really interested in is Lane Johnson. That's our agree or disagree today. I think Lane is a Hall of Famer just because I think he's been the best right tackle or one of the 2 or 3 best right tackles pretty much his entire career in the league, which dates back to 2013. So, to me, pretty simple. But I think people are going to be surprised at how hard it is for him because it's been hard for him to make all-pro teams. It's been hard. I think there are several things. Early in his career, he had 2 drug suspensions, 2 banned substance suspensions, rather, that I think really affected the feelings of people in the league at that time. I don't think that's the case now. And I just think the right tackle thing is there. It makes no sense to me because you're looking at every position, right? Well, right tackle is one of those positions. Why should all of the guys in the Hall of Fame be left tackles? I don't get it. But, there used to be that whole thing about the quarterback's blind side. I don't know that quarterbacks really have a blind side anymore. They're running all over the place. The pass rushers come from all over. I just think that's an outmoded concept. But anyway, what do you think about Lane Johnson as a Hall of Fame candidate, and what potential problems do you see in his candidacy?
Yeah, I listed him as likely, and I think Barry Wilner, who ultimately wrote the story and put together the list, I think also had him as likely as opposed to a lock. Barry is a former, as you know, the former Associated Press football writer who retired a couple of years ago. And to his credit, I mean, he's an outstanding football writer. But one of the things he did, which I think certainly helped Lane, was he, a few years back on the All-Pro ballot, split it, made it position specific. There's a left tackle, and it has to be a guy who played left tackle for the better part of that season. Right tackle, same thing with the rest of the positions. And so that, Lane has made 2 All-Pro teams since then. But as you mentioned, left tackle, right tackle, really, it doesn't matter anymore. Teams are going to line up their rushers where they can exploit someone. Lane has faced the best pass rushers in the league over the last 10 years. I mean, he's faced Micah Parsons. He's faced, you go down the list, Myles Garrett. I mean, and he's basically shut them all down. I mean, this guy has not given up a sack the last 2 years.
Right.
All that said, the lack of all pro recognition, because he's at the end of his career, near the end of his career. So at most he's going to probably end up with one or two more all pros.
Mm-hmm.
Did not make the all decade team, which they'll hold against him for that as well. And that I think had more to do with him playing right tackle than
Mm-hmm.
So when it was just when you could vote for two left tackles, that's when he really suffered. Joe Thomas and I forget who was getting voted. Jason Peters was one of few, so that hurt him. So, but he'll get in. I think he's just going to have to wait a few years. But when he becomes eligible, I'm certainly going to make his case with the voters, assuming I'm still alive. But I think, I think Lane does not have to worry about eventually being in the Hall of Fame. It's just that he won't be in his first or second year.
Well, if you look at the Eagles that they're on the team now, who have a chance, 3 of them are offensive linemen. I'm counting Jason Peters, who obviously isn't on the Eagles now, but he will be considered an Eagle when he makes the Hall of Fame, and Jason Kelce. And you mentioned with offensive linemen, it's a little more complicated than it is if you're the greatest quarterback of your era. Do you think all these guys wait a little bit? Do you think one of them gets in first time? What are your thoughts?
Well, if I had to guess, I'm really going to be interested to see what happens with Jason when he becomes eligible. My guess is he'll become a finalist right away. Just might not make final 5 and get in Canton his first or second year. I don't think he'll have to wait very long. You look at his. He's got how many All Pros does he have? I want to say 5. Yeah, 5 All Pros.
Yeah.
Nobody with 6 or more has not made the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
And what's interesting about his 5 All Pro selections is they've all come since 2017. It was like this guy was just finally discovered late in his career by people. He's. There
was a perception, as you know, that he was so small that there was a time when people thought he struggled with nose tackles. Some of that was true and some of it wasn't. And there was, I think he has said at the beginning of his career, he was a little bit of a hellraiser like his brother. He didn't he made it. He was a starter from the day he walked on as a 6th round pick, which is extraordinary. And he's been very, very good his whole career. There was never a time when he wasn't good, but he missed like his whole second season with a knee injury. And, it probably took not until 2017, but probably until like 2015 or so before he really got that kind of momentum as a no doubt standout kind of guy. But one thing I wanted to ask you about with him, and I know this shouldn't play into Hall of Fame, but you mentioned John Lynch. When John Lynch was a player, the Bucs did win the Super Bowl that year that the Eagles should have won it. B, John Lynch had commercials. He was chunky soup. He did this. He did that. He had a profile, that I don't think Brian Dawkins had nationally. And when I look at Kelce, his brother helps, I think, because everybody knows about the Kelces. And everybody, this is, in fact, if they were to retire the same year, I wouldn't be shocked if there was a drive to have them go into the Hall the same year, I just think Kelce is one of those guys that everybody in the league knows now. Every fan knows. And I think that helps, whether it should help or not. It probably shouldn't, because it really has nothing to do with how well you play. But with Jason Peters, you're talking about a guy that dominated his position, but is kind of the opposite in that he has almost no profile. He doesn't really talk very much. And when he does talk, he doesn't say much that makes national news. Do you think he'll have any sort of difficulty with the voters?
Some, but I think enough people, I talked to Howard Mudd before he died about Jason, talked to other coaches who just will tell you that Jason Peters is like kind of a once in a generation left tackle. That, I mean, the way he could move side to side, the athleticism he had for a guy that occasionally was up at around 360. It was just amazing. Doesn't have a great deal of all pros because he was, Joe Thomas was playing during much of his career. But I think, it'll be interesting. I think I have him as a lock. I had Jason as a lock. And, you're right about Jason having a brand, and then he also has a Super Bowl win, which the selectors in the room consider, especially if that guy played a role. I mean, Jason, as you remember, had missed the 2017 season and Super Bowl with that ACL. So so that, I think that'll definitely help Jason Kelsey.
Okay.
But Jason Peters is just, I think enough people saw him and appreciate him, and will talk to people that played against him and coached against him who will sing his praises, that he won't have any trouble getting in.
All righty. Well, we have some more Eagles who might have Hall of Fame credentials to talk about when we come back. We've got to go to commercial again, though. We'll be right back with Bowen on the Birds after this.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
And we're back for Bowen on the Birds. Our second half here is underway, the second half kickoff. Paul Domowitch is with me, and I'm very thankful for that. Paul will have, by the way, his own podcast on A2D Radio coming up next month. And we're all excited about that. Maybe I can be a guest and I won't have to talk quite as much. I don't we'll have to see what he does. Paul has always had when we worked at the Daily News, the way we worked it is I more or less was strictly Eagles, and he did a lot of league-wide stuff. So he has more contacts and more of a perspective of the league-wide situation than I do. And I think that'll add a lot of value to what he does here for A2D. But we were talking about the Hall of Fame, and I'm looking over your story now, the story that 33rd Team did that you contributed to. I'm trying to remember, other than Fletcher Cox, was there anybody else that we haven't mentioned?
That was it among among current players. Now
Fletcher is an interesting one. If you told me Fletcher Cox wasn't Canton bound, I wouldn't stomp my feet and rend the hem of my garment, frankly. I see him as a borderline guy. I see him as a guy who other teams certainly game plan for, which is one of the criteria, I guess, for being an all-time great. But was the production really there day in and day out? I know defensive tackles don't have the sack totals that edge rushers have, but there were times Fletch had such great potential and such physical gifts. There were entire years that I thought could have been better. What did you think?
I agree. I have a hard time putting him in any of the three Hall of Fame categories, including potentially, because he's at the end of his career. This could be his last year, so he's not going to enhance his statistics or his all pros. He did make the 2010s all decade team. It's just, in 2018, Les, you remember that season, he was as dominant I mean, there was him and Aaron Donald as interior defensive linemen. The two of them were just a cut above everyone else. And it was like he had prepared for that season, and it all came together for him. There were years leading up to that where he was pretty good. He excelled as a pass rusher in Billy Davis's defense in that 3-4 that Billy played when he was Chip Kelly's.
Which is really notable and unexpected, frankly. I don't think anybody thought that would happen. He was a 3-4 DE. You're not supposed to be a dominant pass rusher as a 3-4 DE.
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of a 5 technique guy that, it worked out well for him. But, as a pass rusher, and Fletcher will tell you he's been double or triple teamed most of his career. And to a certain degree, that's the case. But I think beyond that 2018 season when he had, he's had 2 double-digit sack seasons. Right. I think he's only had 2 or 3 with more than 7 sacks. So, I mean, he hasn't been a great sack guy. I've really been disappointed in him since 2018. I mean, I thought after that season, he was just going to take off and just dominate. And it was almost like he got satisfied. Yeah. And when he got satisfied, everybody started taking advantage of him with double and triple teams. And he would be complaining a lot about holds, and a lot of it was legitimate, but other guys kind of picked up the slack. I mean, I really think he's going to – I don't see him as a Hall of Famer. I kind of put him in a class like I did with Donovan. I mean, people would ask me about Donovan McNabb, and as much as – I mean, if he ever made the final 15, he's not going to now, but I would have had to make a case for him, or at least I would have been honest. I would have said, I'm not sure that he belongs in, and I feel the same way about Fletcher. There's a big difference between very good and great, and I think that's the difference between Fletcher and Cox and the Hall of Fame.
I agree, and what you said about Donovan, I've always felt 2 more good years, 2 more really good prime years, and he's a definite Hall of Fame quarterback. He's very, very close, but he wasn't that old when his career kind of went. And I don't feel like he did everything he possibly could have done to prolong that. Yeah. I would love to sit down with the guy sometime off the record and talk about he felt so betrayed when the Eagles traded him. And it was a surprise to no one else in the world at that time. If you remember how that previous season had ended with back-to-back losses to Dallas in the regular season finale and the first playoff game, and it was just clear to everybody this has gone as far as it can go. There has to be a new plan. There has to be a new way forward. They thought it was going to be Kevin Cobb initially, which did not work out. But Donovan was floored when they traded him on Easter Sunday, and he never really got over that, I think. And you were what, 31 or so? You still could have really done something. You were in Washington, you were in Minnesota. There were weapons certainly in Minnesota. You could have made it, and you just didn't. You just kind of walked off, to me. But anyway, those are the Eagles Hall of Fame. What's really interesting, I think, is to discuss, and we're not going to get into this real depth because we have other things to talk about, and the hour is moving by here. But there are guys on this team that don't have resumes right now because they haven't been in the league long enough. But A.J. Brown, unless something horrible happens, is going to have a Hall of Fame resume someday, I think. Jalen Hurts, we're projecting way down the line here, but unless something happens to Jalen Hurts, I think we're looking at the best quarterback in Eagles history, probably. There are probably some other guys on this team that I don't think Brandon Graham's ever going to be a he's the perfect Eagles Hall of Fame guy who isn't really a pro football Hall of Fame guy, I think. But you can some of the rookies even, Jalen Carter, look at the potential some of these people have. Every year your first round pick isn't somebody that's like dominated college football. I mean, they have I guess what I'm very clumsily trying to say is they have a tremendous talent base right now, and it's going to be real interesting to see over the coming years how that manifests itself, because it's certainly more talent than we are used to seeing around here, decade in and decade out. And I'm real eager. I hope I get to see all of it going forward here. But we have other stuff we want to talk about as well. What did you think about that, Domo? Those guys that I mentioned, would you mention anyone else? Dallas Goedert?
Yeah, I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen the rest of their careers. I mean, they're guys. I mean, like right now, you look at around the league at guys like Mahomes and Jefferson, and you think they're locks to make the Hall of Fame, and they probably are. But it's so early in their careers. I mean, an injury, you just never know.
Yeah, I think if Mahomes has even a couple more good years, you got to take him, whether he has the career that you would have thought, from where he is right now or not. He's really close. Jefferson obviously is not as close, but it's going to be an interesting era, and some trends are going to develop that might be contrary to trends we've been seeing. I think, running is kind of coming back into play a little bit for some teams, and we'll see what impact that has. Defense is changing. I've often thought you can't really win a Super Bowl with defense anymore, but I could be wrong about that. And defenses adapt, and the Fangio type system that's prevalent right now might produce a defense that you can win a Super Bowl with. I don't know. But we have other things we want to talk about. There's another piece that you wrote yourself on, there was not a compilation, on 33rd Team, about college coaches and the NFL and the whole merry-go-round of that. And your jumping off point was this time NIL, name, image, and likeness, and transfer portal have just blown college sports as we know it to smithereens. And if you're a college football coach right now, you have to be thinking, wouldn't it be easier to do this in the NFL? I mean, it wouldn't seem, but it's basically the same thing. You're working with salaries, and you're working with free agency. I don't know what's going to happen there. You made some very good points in that story about the problems with adapting, and that guys who haven't ever coached in the NFL have a very hard time making that transition. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's, I think a lot of those guys who've never coached an NFL guy don't understand that they're grown men. I mean, there's a big difference between dealing with spoiled kids now down there who, are going to leave you and transfer if you look at them the wrong way, compared to these guys. I mean, Chip Kelly, I want to say, found that out a little bit. I mean, he had 2 very successful years, 2 10-6 seasons. But I was surprised when he left, like people like Lane Johnson just spewed hate for him because he ran them into the ground with that no huddle system of his. And to his credit, Lane never said a word during when Chip was there. Played his heart out. But Lane's an honest guy. You ask him what he thought later on, and he'll tell you. But I've seen. I'm trying. Jason Garrett was a guy, and it wasn't that he came from college, but if you don't relate to these pro athletes, you've got no chance. They have to respect you. If they don't, and that's what a college coach is dealing with. If he's got, a lot of the college coaches like Bill O'Brien, when he came from Penn State, he had several years as a pro coach, as an assistant. Guys like that have some NFL experience when they get there. Dick Vermeil had it when he came to the Eagles. He had been with the Rams before going to UCLA. But if you're a guy with none, like Urban Meyer did, he was just he thought he could treat these guys like he did his players at Ohio State, and that turned out to come right back in his face. So that's the biggest problem.
Okay. Well, we have one last commercial break. We're going to pick up this subject because I have some more thoughts on it, and I hope Domo does as well. And we have one or two other things to get to on Bowen on the Birds.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
And we're back with Bowen on the Birds with Paul Domowitch. We were talking about college coaches going to the NFL and why it often doesn't work. And I think there's a tradition that Domo mentioned of college coaches being guys who are used to dictating to players, not treating players as adults, being very high-handed, I guess, with them. I wonder if that's going to change in this new era of college athletics. Now that you are paying the players, now that they can leave whenever they want, I just wonder if guys like Urban Meyer, for example, are still going to be successful college coaches. I don't know. Maybe they will start to develop college coaches who have that ability more. But we were talking about Chip Kelly, a fascinating subject to me. I kind of liked Chip, big jerk that he was. I just felt he was smart and he was interesting, and that goes a long way for me. I don't like bland very much. But Chip, there was such a dichotomy in terms of X's and O's. I think he was brilliant. I think he did things that are still being used in the league today. A lot of innovations, but when it came to people, he was terrible, not only in relating to people as he walked around the NovaCare complex, but in evaluating personnel. It just anything with a human element was kryptonite to him. It seemed like. I mean, am I being unfair there?
No. I mean, Chip, after his firing, made famous through Jeff Lurie the term emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Which clearly Jeff Lurie felt he didn't have. And a lot of that was that basically had to do with the way he related to people. He'd walk down hallways at the, at the training facility and not acknowledge the existence of even Lurie if he passed him in the hallway. That kind of thing. I don't know if Chip's changed or not. I haven't. I'm like you. I actually liked him. I got along with him.
Yeah.
Where he's left his mark, I think, is his sports science ideas have carried over to other teams. How they
Eagles still do all that stuff. They don't do the sleep monitors and stuff that was kind of intrusive, but all the other stuff that he brought in is right as he left it. It was permanent. Yeah.
I mean, he's the first guy that realized, hey, you're going to the West Coast. You don't have to leave on Thursday. Go as late as possible rather than as early as possible.
Right.
He's the guy that changed. When you start, when you have that on Monday, he would practice more than most teams who thought you're supposed to just rest up then. I mean, so he things like that is where I thought made his mark in this league. But it's you're right. I mean, it wasn't his shortcomings had more to do with his personality than they did with any problems of his ability to coach.
And he was in the news again this weekend. I don't know if you saw, but Deshaun Jackson was on some show or something, and was again, belaboring the the 10-year feud with Chip. And to me, it was interesting because I really think Deshaun feels like this had a dramatic effect on his career. Getting traded out of here. I don't think he ever played in an organization that was as committed to winning. Had he stayed here, who knows? He might have been part of the Super Bowl 52 team instead of like Alshon Jeffrey or someone like that. When that year that Deshaun did come back, and unfortunately injury and other things kept that from being any kind of memorable thing, but he was so glad to be back. I mean, he was genuinely glad to be back. This was where he wanted to play. He's played everywhere now, but I think he would have loved to have fashioned a career as an Eagle and been remembered as an Eagle, and had that when he retired as a part of the community and a guy that was locally famous around here, in terms of endorsements and opportunities and things. And Chip kind of took that away from him, and I think he's still very upset about it. Yeah,
I mean, Chip made some curious moves. I mean, he did the same thing with Shady McCoy. He and Deshaun were fixtures on that team. The difference was, Shady went to Buffalo and played well. Deshaun never seemed to get it. It was injuries, things like that just kept. Part of it, I think, was LaShawn was just looking for an excuse for his poor play. Shady, Shady went to Buffalo and made the best of it. I think you were mentioning earlier Hall of Fame people. I think Shady's eligible in like 2026. I mean, he's not going to be an early candidate, but you look at his numbers, he's a guy that certainly is going to deserve consideration.
How many running backs in this era are as productive for as many years as he was productive? And he could catch, he could do other things. I mean, he was a modern running back. I feel very strongly he was a dominant player for that era. It's unfortunate the running back position is so devalued that I wonder if very many of those guys, are going to make the Hall of Fame just because it's considered a position you don't need to have anybody any good at anymore. But yeah, so Chip Kelly, great mystery still to me, exactly why that guy couldn't figure it out. And, it's college coaches coming to the NFL. It sure looks like it's great to have that NFL component, but moving forward, if the college game has changed so dramatically that maybe that won't be the case. I don't know. So we'll see about that. Yeah. I do have one more thing before we go. I meant to talk last week when I had Jimmy Kempski on about this, and we never got around to it. But Eagles rookies, and there will be, you got 2 first-round picks, first of all, and a second-round pick, and some other guys, and fans are going to expect to see these guys on the field. Most good teams, as you know, Paul, don't play rookies a whole hell of a lot. They don't stick them into crucial positions and start them. But if you had to pick a rookie who's going to be very noticeable on the 2023 Eagles, who'd you pick?
Well, I'm going to go with the obvious, Les Jalen Carter. I mean, I just think, I know we saw last year with Jordan Davis, he kind of, after he got hurt, we didn't see much of him. But I think Carter's gonna have an immediate impact. I think he's got something to prove. He's an incredible athlete. I think and they need him to be very good very quickly inside after losing. Help me with the name here. San Francisco. Hargraves.
Yes.
So they're going to be. I think the new defensive coordinator, Sean Desai, is going to be relying on that kid to play well very early.
Well, I think you're probably right. I think the safety, and you're going to have to help me out with his name, Sidney
Brown.
Yes, Sidney Brown. He will be.
Guys, here less.
Yes. I was pretty sure it was Brown, but I wanted to get I wanted to do like a call and response kind of thing. Sidney Brown, he'll have a shot maybe at winning a starting job. We'll have to see. Rookie safety is a pretty complex position in the NFL these days, and a rookie starting safety is kind of rare, but we'll see. The other guy that could, Nolan Smith obviously is an edge rusher. Rookie edge rushers don't tend to be superstars right off the bat unless you're just physically dominant like a Bosa or something like that. But we'll have to see. Nolan Smith could get some reps. Who knows? Other guys get hurt. Hey. And the other guy would be Tyler Steen. And I know there are some people that think Tyler Steen's the starting right guard. I have no idea, but I'm looking at Cam Jurgens and the fact that they were very, very high on him last season, even though he didn't get to play much, and the fact that I really do think this is finally Jason Kelce's last season.
Yeah.
And I think there's such a value, if it works out, of having Cam Jurgens play next to Jason Kelce, watch Jason Kelce, talk to Jason Kelce, work out double teams and things like that with Jason Kelce for a year before stepping into the center position. I think Cam Jurgens goes into camp with a leg up on that competition, and Tyler Steen's going to have to be really amazing to start ahead of Cam Jurgens. How do you feel about that?
Well, I agree with you, Les. Although I think Stout will let them fight it out, and if there is if Jurgens or Steen, whichever one really outplays the other, he's not going to let the fact that Jurgens is going to be moving inside next year affect his decision, because I think Stout feels he can teach. If Jurgens belongs at right guard this year, I think he feels that he can still teach him enough about the center position, and that he'll learn just from osmosis from playing next to this Jason, that it won't be a problem next year if he has to step in and start in at center.
Okay, well that's certainly a credible position. We're getting close to training camp here, Domo. What, about 20 days till they report?
Yeah.
Looking at the roster, there's not that much that I would tinker with. I would probably look around. I might wait until some cuts or something, but I might look around for a veteran linebacker to just, even if it wasn't somebody that's like, oh my gosh, they got so-and-so, just a guy who's played in the league a while and has a little bit of a resume. I don't know how you feel about that. The other thing would be an offensive tackle with a little bit of a resume. If you get Mailata or Johnson hurt, you're looking at Driscoll. You don't have Andre Dillard anymore, who was a former first-round pick, who's going to start now in Tennessee. What do you think about those two situations? Or were those the two you would target?
Yeah, I don't know. Howie's over the last several years has gotten really good at realizing you need more than to be one deep. I mean, he's done a good job. They're as deep as any team in football right now. He's learned the hard way that you can have a great offensive line and watch it go to hell by having people get hurt. He's coming off a year now where I think they only lost 3 games to injuries on the offensive line last year, which is remarkable. Can it happen again? Sure, but I'm guessing that it won't. And they're going to need some of that depth this year. So if they can, add a veteran tackle, I think that would be that would be the kind of move I could see them making.
Okay. Well, I think we're about out of time here, Domo. It's been a great pleasure speaking to you from your palatial abode in Marlton. And best to the family, best to your grandson. I hope to see you soon, and I'm really looking forward to you kicking off your podcast on A2D, and maybe I can watch it and get some pointers.
You are going to be an early guest. Count on it.
I will look forward to that opportunity.
And I'll be texting some ideas on British television.
Oh, yeah. Domo and I are both devotees of British detective shows, and Endeavor ended last week, Domo. Did you was that one you were watching?
I saw the first episode. I haven't seen episode 2 yet.
Oh, okay. All righty.
I think I
We'll
might
get
watch it
caught up on that. But anyway, for those of you who are more Eagles fans than devotees of British detective shows, we'll be back next week with another Bowen on the Birds. And thanks again to Paul Domowitch for this week's show.
Take care.